Welcome. This session is about how to write a project charter. Whenever we are starting a new project, it is essential to have a formal document which lists down what is this project all about, what is the objectives, why are we doing what we are doing, what is the ultimate goal, when are we going to do it, how are we going to do it. It becomes very important to have such a formal document which serves a lot of purposes which we will detail, and that is called a project charter or project management charter, which essentially has to be written in the very beginning of the program or the project, so that you get a buy-in from all the stakeholders involved. There is no ambiguity about the goals and direction of the project and what exactly we have to implement and what we have to do. And also it becomes as a sales document for the stakeholders to produce to somebody, okay, we are spending so and so much of budget on so and so purpose, and this is the outcome that we are expecting, and this is how we are doing. So project charter is an essential document. It's a formal document, and it has to be done before starting the project, or at the very beginning of the project. Sometimes we may feel that it's just another document and it's just for the project managers to have write it down and written it down, and it's not going to be useful for all the project team members. It's a waste of time, it's just one more documentation, etc. That is not the case, and it is a very essential document which sets the tone and direction for the project to go about. If somebody new joining in the team, you can have a look at it, he or she can have a look at it, the project charter, to see, oh, okay, this is the project goals, this is the objective which we are trying to achieve, when are we trying to achieve, what is the budget, what are the key stakeholders involved, what exactly is the scope. All of this information in a very concise and very succinct manner has to be written down very clearly in the project charter, and that becomes the focal point throughout the course of the project. If you are in doubt whether this should be the part of the scope of the project or not, you should be able to at least go back to the project charter and check at high level what are we setting out to do, and is it aligned with that or not. So many such points in time during the course of the project, there will be a necessity to look back to the project charter, and it sort of becomes like an emblem, right, where everybody can have a look at it. Okay, this is the project, this is the goal, this is the objective, and this is what we are going to do. So that is the whole purpose of coming up with a project charter. And a very important part of that writing down the project charter is what are the components involved when we are writing the project charter, and how to write that, and giving the brief overview on some of the tips how we can come up with a project charter is what we will cover in this session. Okay, so this session is intended mainly for all the professionals who are executing projects and need not necessarily be the project manager or program managers only. The reason being, a lot of times when we are executing some activity, it is like a project. It may be called a mini project or a mega project, whatever it is. And these principles and the details can be applied to any such activities, and not just in the professional context only, and this can be applied to any of the personal projects as well. Okay, so with that, let's get started, and we will go through the how part of it, because we covered what is a project charter and why we have to write a project charter in detail anyway now. And now we go to the details of the project charter. And before we start, I think one thing we need to be clear as to what are the what is the document that we would like to use, what is the template we want to use project charter. And the point here is that more than the template and the formatting of the document, what is more important is the content, right? What is the content that has to go in the project charter? As for templates, you can have a look at many different templates that you can see on web. Just Google project charter template and you will see many variations of a project charter, and you can pick whatever you think it is suitable to your project and customize it for your needs. The format and the template is not very important aspect in my view, and what is important is the details that you are going to cover in the project charter. And as you can see, there are a lot of different formats. You can pick and choose the one which is, you find it comfortable to use in the project. Okay, so now going into the how part, what are the different details that are going to go in the project, right? First, let's cover the summary, right? So before we go into the how part, what we covered is what part and the why part, right? We already covered that. So you can go back to the video and check it as well, and how we have covered all of that. And now we are going to go to the how part of it, right? So how part, let's first go to see what are we going to cover in the summary. The summary should at least contain, the project title. What are you calling the project as? It should have a meaningful name, and it's also very important that you reference that name in most of your presentations, status reports, or any documentation, etc. So you need to have a name which is socialized with all the stakeholders, and something which will refer to during the course of the project. So the project title, definitely you have to call it out very clearly. Then you have to also call it about the project start date. There should not be any ambiguity around the starting of the project. So many times what happens is that there will be so many stakeholders involved. There's a budget approval which is required. There are alignment of the teams that is required. And there's always, when you're starting a project, there is always a challenge to say this is the fixed the date of start, and unless you target and strive towards that start date, it is very difficult for alignment of all the parties and all the things to be in place. So hence it becomes very important to socialize the exact project start date and the project duration also, whether it is for 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, whatever that is. You have to call it very explicitly. This is the duration for which the project is going to be executed. And eventually there could be some change requests coming in, new scope getting added, all of that might happen, which might go under revisions. But at the beginning of the project, what is the duration that you have envisaged? So that you call it out in the project duration. And next is project sponsor. This is absolutely important, because at the end of the day, you need to have a buy-in from the sponsor who is giving you the money to execute the project. Right, so he has to have the details of what you are going to execute, and this project charter has to go through him as well. And in the document, you have to explicitly call out the person's name who is the sponsor of the project and corresponding designation. And you also need to have project director who is going to give the direction to the project team, right? How it has to be executed, what should be done and what should not be done, what is the culture and value we are going to use during the course of the project. So setting up the direction and the tone, etc., will be done by the project director throughout the course of the project, and you have to explicitly call out the name of the project director. And project manager, who is going to manage the day-to-day operations of the project and doing all the legwork required in the project. So project manager becomes a very important player in the overall execution of the project, and you have to explicitly call out the project manager's name. And if any you are taking the services from any of the vendors, let's say, and the third parties, you call out the project managers from those vendors as well, if they are going to play a crucial role in the overall execution of the project. So you have to clearly call out the project managers who will be associated with execution of the program. So that is the project manager field. And then finally the executive summary, and this is the most important part, where you are summarizing the overall project in a very bird's eye level view, where you call out what is this project about and how are you going to do it, what are you going to do it, etc., in a very concise manner. It may be 2 to 3 paragraphs at the most, maybe with 1 to 2 sentences in each paragraph. So approximately maybe 5 to 6 lines, where you are summarizing the whole project as an executive summary. And this becomes very important because this document, if it's going to be circulated to the finance teams, the directors and the senior management to have a quick look at the project, the spend and the timeline and the objectives, etc., it becomes very important to have a well written executive summary. So in the executive summary field, you have to mention about the project, maybe with 5 to 6 lines, let's say 3 paragraphs in it, or take another approach also where we summarize it well. But the point here is that it gives the complete picture of the project for anybody looking at from the bird's eye level view. So these are the 7 sections that you will cover. And if you think of a table with one column being these fields and second column being the summary of that, you should write it in a very concise manner, not more than 1 or 2 lines against each of them. And in this section it is very straightforward anyway, where you cover most of the aspects of these details. Okay, so now in the next section you should cover about the project, right? So if I write down what are you going to cover, you definitely have to cover project objective. Why are we doing it, right? So the objective, so to achieve certain goal, so you maybe a digital transformation of the project, so that you achieve so and so benefits. Let's say a cost savings of 40% of the running cost that we have today. You are going to do so and so things, maybe a digital transformation or implementing certain functionality in different application. Or if it's in a manufacturing world, you might as well say you are going to manufacture this product which you are expecting to sell in X quantity, which will return maybe this much of ROI in the next 5 years and things like that, right? So the objective has to be very clear as to what are you setting out to do, and that you have to clearly articulate in a very succinct manner, so that anybody can understand, okay, this is what we are doing and why we are doing the project. So that is the project objective. And next field is high level scope, right? So you need to know what is the scope, because oftentimes what happens is throughout the project there will be times when the project scope keeps getting added. You have always ambiguity. Some person thinks it's in scope, some thinks it is not in scope. Business always asks to add something more to the scope, because that's the reality, part of a project life cycle, and always there is a conflict as to, okay, this is part of scope or not, right? To tightly control the scope and also scope change management later, it is absolutely important to call out very articulated way, very high level scope, and call out if there is anything out of scope as well. So make it very clear. It need not go into a very detailed, minute level, and that's where the challenge lies, I understand. But then there will be a separate set of documentation that will cover that. But it has to be at least at very high level, should clearly call out this is the only scope that we have as part of this project, and this are the scope which is not part of this project. So that's very important. After covering the scope, you will cover a bit more about the project as to what is the business benefit or business case, if you may call it that way. Because for getting the approval, it becomes very important to make a decision as to how much money we are going to spend, and then what is the returns that we are going to get it. So the budget as well as the business benefit becomes very important aspect to clearly call out, telling this much we are going to spend, and this is the reason why. I mean, this is the reason why we are going to get it right. This is the benefit that we are going to get out of the project. So that is the project budget and the business benefit part that we'll cover. And the next level you cover is high level plan. Right? It may have high level stages. If it is an SDLC like cycle, it could be starting with the design, build, test, production, implementation, etc., and various cycles. I mean, if depending on the project, so it could have such kind of high level plan to say how are we going to implement in terms of the overall duration that we have, and all the high level activities mentioned in the high level project plan. And not just the plan itself, it also needs to have the contingency plan, right? In case that there are some challenges that we encounter in the execution of the project, how are we going to mitigate it? What is the backup plans? How are you going to have that contingency plan also needs to be listed down. And when we are talking about the project itself, definitely you need to have major deliverables, what will come out of the project, and the key milestone dates, key milestones. So when you capture this, it gives the sense of the overall project for anybody to have a look at it, right? What are the objectives? What are the business benefits? High level scope, plan, contingency plans, major deliverables, and key milestones. So you define the key milestones so that let's say you are in an IT world, you are implementing a certain transformation project, and for let's say a US company which spans across multiple states. You may have multiple phased rollouts, maybe phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, each covering multiple states. So you could have milestones for each of those phases broken down into key phases within them, right? Or if you are in a product development lifecycle project, you could define those phases in terms of the stages of the progress that you make in the product development. So likewise, there could be n different ways or means or ways in which you can come up with the key milestones. You define at very high level what are the key milestones and major deliverables in the project. So that's how you define the about the project, you write it down. So the project charter now covers the summary and the project, about the project itself. Now the next thing I think we have to cover is about the people involved, all the stakeholders involved. So this becomes very important because there is no ambiguity after you define these are the personnel who are going to sign off, or these are the persons who are going to approve, these are the persons who will be involved, will be informed, all of that. Unless you define that, it becomes the it's the ambiguity point. So you define all the key stakeholders, who are they, and you define project organization as well. So you can do project organization. So what it can have is a simple org chart, who is who in terms of the hierarchy, who will report to whom, their roles and responsibilities. You call it org chart, or roles and responsibilities. Right? And you also call out any third parties involved. And whether you define the sign-off authority as part of the key stakeholders itself, or as a separate line item, it's up to you, but clearly call out the sign of authority. Who is the person who is going to sign off? If it is too detailed, maybe you can reference to a detailed project management plan or whatever the document you might have to. But the point here is that you make the roles and responsibilities of the people involved in the project very clear and explicit. It may not take a huge set of text to write, but all this information will make sure that when it is there, it becomes, or it makes it very clear to everybody. So if you look at it now, we have covered the summary, right? We have covered the summary, we covered about the project, we have covered about the people, and the last things is about making the project success, right? What are those key success factors? So and so thing has to happen, then only the project will be successful, right? So you define maybe as a 2, 3, 4 bullet points telling, okay, these are the key success factors for this project, and you upfront call it out as saying that these are the assumptions we are making, right, before we execute the project. And if that doesn't happen, you can always go back to tell that because of so and so reasons this has not happened, number one. And number two is also, when you're making the assumption, you're making it very clear to everybody, and if that is not holding true, you can get it corrected then and there before you start the project, instead of having an issue much later. So as I said in the beginning, the project charter, although it may look like a simple Word document which may not be of much use, etc., etc., it is a very essential, important, formal document. It has to be there for each and every project, because all these key assumptions, key success factors, the key risks you foresee, and key issues, right? Risks are something you are foreseeing in the future. Issues you already know right now. Key issues, key risks, key issues, or maybe key dependencies. You will definitely have key dependencies, be it with certain set of people or the vendors or different organization, third party, internal challenges with other projects. There could be several dependencies and key constraints. If something does not happen, you can't progress forward, right? So all these key success factors, key parts which drive the success of the project, which has to be ensured, you have to call it out, maybe as 1 or 2 liners or maximum 3 liners, but it has to be called out. So that way it serves multiple purposes, because it allows the project manager to think about it. It allows the the team to have a look at it and provide inputs to make this stronger. If they see certain different dependencies or constraints that may have an impact on the project success, they can always come back and highlight. And getting the inputs from the team and writing it down goes a long way in actually making sure that we address them. And finally, it's not up to only writing it down, it's also actually implementing it and actually executing to make sure that we resolve those issues if there are any. But then these have to be called out at the beginning of the project while starting the project. These are the key success factors and points that have to be taken care, without which the project will not be successful. So at very high level, these are the points that we capture in writing down the project charter. As I said, template can be used whatever is comfortable, but the details that have to go in a project charter are these. So we have noted down about 25 of them. Sometimes you may combine a few, sometimes if it is not relevant to the project, you customize it. And if you think there are any other points that you have to capture at the upfront before starting the project, I suggest we go ahead and capture them, and you can always remove if it is not relevant or not required. But the point here is to have a very key concise document. It should not be running too long. I mean, the project charter is not meant for that. There will be many detailed documents written out separately, but project charter has to be a very simple, concise document covering all these aspects. So yeah, so we covered the project charter. I hope you got some ideas about how to write down the project charter, and you can have many examples and you will get to know a bit more on it anyway. But few tips I can share, tips for writing it down, right? First, don't ignore, because I have seen the projects which succeed, I have seen the projects which have failed. So it is important for not failing to have such a project charter written down and agreed upon before you start the project. And it is always a challenge. It might sound very simple when we have gone through all these points, saying that, oh, this is a very simple document, you can write it easily. But it is not the case usually. When you're talking about a scope, it's a big topic in itself. You will not ever be able to close any project scope, because it's always a problem. And more you discuss, more you start discussing with the teams involved, the stakeholders, it becomes more and more clear that you are doing something great, in the sense that coming to a terms, an agreement with everybody is very essential for the project success, and it is not easy at the same time. So there may be pushback, there may be people who may not agree, there may be people who may have differences of opinion, etc. But I think it's very important that it has to be frozen. The project charter has to be written down and frozen, and without which you should not. And as a project manager, if you are working, you should not budge until the project charter is closed, to avoid difficulties later. So if even if you are not getting the information that is required to complete the project charter, you have to reach out, strive for it, proactively try to identify, gather all the inputs that are needed to write it down from all the stakeholders, and definitely take into consideration all those inputs and draft a project charter which covers or which completes the project details in totality in a very in a concise manner. So don't ignore the need of the project charter. Need of charter. Yeah, so that is the one important part which has to be kept in mind. Second is, keep it short. Nobody is going to read through the big document, and nobody will be interested, probably apart from project managers and some stakeholders. Many people will not have a look at it, but it's an essential document. You have to keep it short, and most importantly, keep it concise. However, keep it articulate enough for people to understand, and make sure that this is adding value, not just as one more document. Keep it short. That is the second tip, which has to be adhered to. Keep it short but unambiguous and straightforward. Right. So that is the essential part. Template, choose as required, as deemed fit for your project. But if you are running multiple projects within a program, and you are a program manager, or there is a program which is running, which has to be which has multiple projects within it, make sure that you have a consistent template across, so it becomes easy for everybody to follow, and it becomes very clear for you as well. So that is the part about the template. And the fourth tip, I would say, is that communication part, right? Communicate the project charter details to all stakeholders. Yeah, I think this is very important about communicating that this is the project charter we have, these are the objectives, this is the scope, etc. And in fact, even prior to that, I would say involve all stakeholders and gather inputs, right? This is essential, because when you go to the scope or coming up with a plan, it is not just easy that you can simply write it down, any one person, right? It requires a lot of coordination and understanding from different people, subject matter experts, or the people involved in the project. So make sure that you reach out without any hesitance, without hesitating on anything. Gather all the inputs. The eventual goal is to make it more comprehensive, articulate, and good, right? So make sure that you gather and involve all the inputs involving all the stakeholders that are required, and clearly call out every aspect whatever we have covered. Yeah, so I think those are some of the tips, and I think I covered already, but still to say, don't start the project until the charter is agreed. So this is very important. In certain cases, you might end up starting the project without any project document, and then you start writing also in a real scenario. But I think if you have the details agreed upfront before starting the project, that is the best case scenario where you can execute the project well, and as much as possible you have to strive to do that. It's a difficult task in a on the ground, but it's always a best practice to have that very well defined. Okay, so I think we covered what is project charter. Let's go back to once. What all we covered? So we covered what is a project charter, what are the details it contains, why we need it's a formal document, and all of that we covered. And we covered as to why, what is the purpose of having the project charter in a quite detail. I won't want to repeat again. And what we mainly covered is the how, and how do we write it, what are the sections involved in each of them. This is a summary, then about the project itself, and about the people involved in the project, and what are the key parts to take care to make the project success, etc. So essentially you're giving a very high level view of the projects and its objectives, goals, its targets, the money that you are going to spend, how are you going to earn back the benefits, and as well as how are you going to exactly execute on a day-to-day basis within those duration in a very high level manner. And we also covered a few tips about how to go about writing a project charter, and why you should not ignore writing it down, and what purpose it serves. I hope this was useful in some way. If you have never written a project charter, and if you are going to write, definitely I hope that this will be useful. And if you are not going to write the project charter, but you are going to read a project charter, then also I hope that these details will help you understand a bit more. And my suggestion is, whether you are project manager or not, or even just a person working within the project, my suggestion is to have a look at the project charter that you have in your project and ask for it if you have not had a chance to look at it. So that will give you a perspective as to what are you working on and why. I mean, you should know, right? I mean, you should have that view, and that's what the project charter will give you the information. So it covers all personnel, whoever is working on any project. And as I mentioned, don't limit project charter in the sense that it's some document you have to write for a project, a professional project only. If you are having a small mini project or a small project in your personal life itself, it's always better to think in these terms, right? What I'm going to do, why I am doing what I'm doing, what is the benefit I'm going to get, how much expenses I'm going to have in terms of monetary value, how much time I'm going to spend, what is the plan to achieve it. It could be some personal project, maybe it's a financial project, or it may be some something you want, it's a goal you want to achieve, right, on a personal front. Even then, thinking along these lines helps in your life as well. It need not be always the professional project context itself where you can use these details. So okay, so that's all for now, and I hope this was very useful in terms of understanding it. Thank you for going through this session. Thank you.